the first obligation binding upon the mukallaf, that takes us back to the beginning, and you remember what the mukallaf is to know God with certainty. So get that knowledge, okay? Get it, fulfill that obligation. In fulfilling that obligation, you get a huge reward. And in failing to fulfill it, everything else is defective. We pray and we fast, but really your prayer and your fast become absolutely alive and valid when the first obligation has been fulfilled and you really know what you're doing. Okay, then we have the second verse, and he says here, وَإِنَّمَا الْعَالَمُ تُرًّا حَادِثُ وَاللَّهُ مَوْجُودٌ قَدِيمٌ وَارِثُ. If you compare this to other poems, you'll see he's going really fast. So he says, all of the world in its entirety is nothing but temporal. All of the world in its entirety is nothing but temporal. And then he says, and God is existent, pre-existent, and he is creation's everlasting heir. H-E-I-R. Heir. He is the one who inherits the heavens and the earth. Let's just focus now on the first half of the verse. وَإِنَّمَا الْعَالَمُ تُرًّا حَادِثُ. So here he says that the world and everything in it is completely temporal. Okay, now here again we use our language carefully. And we use the word world, which in Arabic, you probably noticed, he used what word? Al-alam. Al-alam. And the world is defined as everything other than God. If we use the word world in just ordinary English discourse, we might think of the earth, right? We might think of this world we're in. We might think of a certain dimension of the world, but here the word world means everything other than God. So the world is what we can see and what we cannot see. It is the angels. It is the throne of God, which is the greatest of all created things. It is the garden, because the garden exists now, but it is not close. And it is the fire. The fire exists now, but it has not been fanned to be intensely hot. It's hot, but it's not been su'irat. It's not been heated up the way that it will be on the day of judgment. But it's there. Okay, so this is all the world. The stars, the planets, the earth, the mountains, the seas, the fishes, the birds, everything. It's all world. And it's the universe. And then it's also all possible universes that might exist, but we don't know about. Those are all the world. The world. Okay, and we call it alam. Alam here is a very meaningful Arabic word, and it means that it is a sign. It is a standing sign of God. This is what the word, in English, our word world, I'm not actually sure what it comes from. My guess would be that it comes from destiny, that which is destined to be, but I'm not sure about that. But in Arabic, the word alam, it means that which is a sign of something else. So the world is an alama. It is a sign, a standing sign. And this means that we want you to use your language in an attentive way and be aware of the fact that everything in this world is a sign of the existence of God. Everything that is finite points to the infinite. Everything that is temporal, which means time limited, time based, points to the non-temporal. Okay? This is what we have to know. We have to understand, how does that work? So the world and everything in the world is a sign of God's existence. وَالْعَالَمُ تُرًّا حَادِثُ. And all of the world is temporal. The word for temporal here in Arabic is hadith. Hadith. In English, our word temporal means time-bound. Time-bound. Existing in time. Limited to time. Having a past, present, and future. And it also implies that those things are space-bound. In other words, they are located in times and therefore also located in places. So the pillar is here at this moment. It wasn't here 40 years ago. It has a beginning. It's time-bound. It was made, and it was made in this place, in this structure. That's what temporal means. Temporal means that the world exists in time and space. In Arabic, the word hadith is a little bit different in that it emphasizes a quality that all time-bound and space-bound things must have. And that is a beginning. A beginning. So the word hadithu in Arabic, which we have translated as temporal, it means that which exists after not existing. That which exists after not existing. Everything that has a beginning. So when he says that the world is all temporal, he means that the world and every single thing in it, energy, matter, atoms, molecules, cells, angels, they all have beginnings in time. They all have beginnings, and there's no exception to that whatsoever. Okay, and here he doesn't tell you how we know that. He expects you to get that from me, or from the commentary, or the teacher. And this is because, again, the poem is meant to go really fast. So he doesn't get into a lot of details like you might get in other books or in other poems. But here you have to understand why we know that the world is temporal. How do you know that? Like, this is a big statement, that the world, which is everything other than God, the angels, the throne, the garden, the fire, the birds, the mountains, they all are temporal. They all have beginnings. How do you know that? And here, our scholars say it is sufficient for you. It is enough for you to understand one proof. There are others, but there's one proof that is enough for you, and that is that change necessarily indicates beginning. That change necessarily indicates beginning. That when things change, those things must be temporal. Anything that changes must have a beginning. And this is a Quranic proof. Allah tells us over and over again about change in the world. The alteration of the days and the night. the change of the seasons, the way that the human being changes, created as a fetus in the womb, growing from something very small to something that is bigger and bigger, then being born, then being a little baby, and then being able to crawl, then being able to walk, then growing and becoming a child, and then a young adult, and then an adult, and then an older person, and maybe even a decrepit older person who's bent over and weak. Allah tells us about the change of things. Okay, so this is one of the most common of all Quranic themes. Look at the world and look at how the world changes. And when Abraham is a little boy and he lives in Babylon, and his people are a people who have lost the knowledge of God, his people will call him to worship the Babylonian Semitic Trinity. The Babylonians had two trinities. Trinities are very common in pagan religion. And the Trinity of Christianity is essentially a pagan belief. It's not a biblical belief at all, not a prophetic belief at all. But the people of Babylon had two trinities. One of them was a Sumerian trinity. The Sumerians were the people who were in Babylon before the Semites. And they believed in a trinity which was the heavens, the earth, and the waters. Heaven, earth, and waters. But the Semites, who came from Arabia, they had a Semitic trinity, which they got probably from the Yemen. The Yemen is probably the homeland of the Semites and of the Arabs. Beautiful land, the Yemen, beautiful. And Abraham's people, the Chaldeans, they came from what is today Qatar and the Emirates. That's where they came from. They were camel nomads, and they invaded Sumeria. They were very powerful, but they were also pagans. And they brought with them a Yemeni Semitic trinity, which was Venus, the Kawkab, the planet, the shining planet, and the moon, Seen. They called the moon Seen. And the sun, Shemesh, the sun, Shams. Okay, and so Abraham, as a young boy, he's called upon, like all of his peers, to worship one of the persons of the Trinity. You can pick Venus, and she's so beautiful. And you can see Venus even before sunset, right? Right here on the horizon. The evening star or the morning star. That's a planet. It's the planet Venus. You can see Venus this evening if you want. You probably saw Venus yesterday. Beautiful. One of the most bright objects in the night sky. And if you don't like that, you can worship the moon. And if you don't like that, you can worship the sun. And this is in the Quran, right? Surah Al-An'am. And Abraham says, but I do not like that which sets. I do not like that which changes, not as a god. Like, oh, Venus is beautiful, yes, but Venus changes. Therefore, Venus cannot be the first principle. And the moon is bright and big, but the moon sets and it changes, and therefore it cannot be God. It cannot be the first principle. It cannot explain creation. And the sun is great and bright, but the sun also sets. The sun also changes. Therefore, the sun cannot be God. All of these are temporal. All of these pertain to a world that has beginnings and that has ends. Okay, so this is a very important proof. And this is adequate. It's very important for you to understand it. How does it work? Okay, so this is a pin, right? A red pin. Do you see the pin, actually? Because, like, if I take off the cap, it's still the same pin. If I were to put on another cap, you know, like the green one, it would still be the same pen. What do you see here? Do you see the essence of the pen? Do you see the penness of the pen? What you see are outward attributes, right? You see the pen is red. You see that the cap is off. You see that the cap is on. You could look through and you could see that it's still full of ink. You can see that this little clip here is a silver color. You can see also that things are written on it in a language. Okay? You see all sorts of attributes. These outward attributes are all that you can perceive by your senses. Okay? That when you see the pen, when you hear the pen, when you feel the pen, it's smooth. When you smell the pen, doesn't have much of a smell. Or if I were to taste it, it doesn't have much of a taste. But I can only perceive by my senses outward attributes. Outward attributes. Okay, even though this pen exists from day to day and from year to year, and it changes all the time. And every outward attribute that this pen has is changing. Every attribute that it has a beginning and a possible end. A beginning and an end. For example, now it has the attribute of moving. And it didn't have that a minute ago, and now it doesn't. Now it's still, and it's on the table. And now it's on the table, and now it's in my hand. These are all outward attributes. And all of these outward attributes have the quality of change or of potential change. And always this change means beginnings and new beginnings and new beginnings. Okay, that's pretty clear, isn't it? Not a problem. But I also see in my rational mind that I cannot coherently, intelligently speak about this pen without its having outward attributes. Right? Can you imagine this pen being a pen if it had no color? If it had no substance? If it wasn't made of plastic? It's made of plastic, I presume. But it's not made of plastic, not of wood, not of metal, not of anything else, not of a reed. If it didn't have ink, if it didn't have any outward attribute. If it didn't have any outward attribute, then we would say about it that it doesn't exist. Do you follow that? We would say about it that it doesn't exist. Therefore, we see in our mind's eye, and this is what the Quran wants you to see, that this pen has the same quality as its outward attributes. They have beginnings, they have ends, therefore it has a beginning and it has a potential end. This is really, really important, and this is something that you need to go through. And maybe this afternoon when we come back, we'll talk about it again. And maybe I'll ask you questions about it first. So we see, if you can get this. But this is what you have to understand. And our scholars would say that this is the most important thing. This is the first step. That you must be able to understand in your mind's eye why and how the quality of change indicates that things have beginnings. When was the pen made? Was it made in 2001, 2007, 2010? I don't know. My mind cannot answer that question without exploring other things. Like maybe the pen will say that it was made in Japan in such and such a year. And that's just a probability. Maybe they were lying when they wrote it. Okay, so I don't know when this pen began, but I know that it did begin. And I know that if the stars move and they change, and they have the potential of change, that they must have a beginning. Just like every attribute they have has a beginning. And just like we cannot conceive of that star as existing without outward attributes that also have the potential of change. Okay, so therefore, the fact that the stars move, the fact that the stars set, the fact that the stars change, and that the earth changes, we have day and night, and you change, you're not the same this year as you were last year, and you won't be exactly the same next year, then that indicates that you have a beginning. Okay, so this is really important, that the world and everything in it is nothing but temporal. Everything in it, the throne, the angels, energy, matter, atoms, the cells, they all have beginnings. And therefore they are finite and they are limited. And as we said before, the finite points to the infinite. The temporal points to the non-temporal. How is that so? Because there cannot be, it is impossible for there to be an infinite chain of finite causes that could explain the world. This world cannot account for itself, and nothing in it and no combination of things in it can account for it. Okay, it must necessarily point to a sufficient cause. Okay, if we had finite causes, if we could imagine that A made B, or let's say that Z was made by, I can't do the alphabet backwards, X, Y, Z. Y, and Y was made by X and so forth, and then C was, and then B, and then A, and so forth. You know, no, that can't be. Because if we imagined a finite set of infinite causes, we could not cross it. There are no sets of infinite things. Okay, when mathematics talks about infinity, mathematics is also very clear that infinity is an idea. There cannot be an infinite set of things. But if there were, okay, and mathematicians often talk about things that don't exist, but if there were, you wouldn't be able to cross it. So that if we say that no, you know, we just keep going back further and further and further and further. Okay, if you go back further and further, if that were the case, that there is no beginning to these finite causes, there's no way you could get to the present moment. Okay, and the impossibility of an infinite chain of finite causes is one of the clearest of all intellectual proofs. Therefore, there has to be something else. There has to be a sufficient cause. And that means that the temporal world is a sign that indicates to us categorically that its cause belongs to another order of existence. And that's what we will call necessary being. Okay, so in Islam, then, when we talk about the world, we affirm that the world is temporal. It has beginnings, and everything in it has a beginning. How do we know that? Change. How do we know change indicates that? Because of the necessary connection between changing outward attributes and things. Okay? And there cannot be an infinite chain of these finite causes. Therefore, they indicate another order of reality, and that is the existence of God. The finite indicates the infinite. The dependent indicates the independent. The temporal indicates the non-temporal. This is really, really important. And this is something that you need to work with. You need to try to go through it on your own. Do you think you can do that? It's not that complicated, but you have to make sure you get the steps right. And this is what is implicit in what the Quran is telling us about all the time when it tells us about change in God's world. Okay? And so for that, so we say the world is contingent. Contingent, that all of this world is dependent on something else, which alone can explain it, which alone can account for it. And that other that the world is contingent upon cannot be like the world in any way. That must be necessary existence. It must have the quality of necessary existence. It must have no beginning. It must have no end. It must be self-sufficient. It must be dissimilar, and it must be one. Okay? So we will suffice with that now. Inshallah, we'll come back, let's say around 6:30. We will pray Asr, and then we will meet for another hour and a half. Inshallah, we will begin with this, and I'm sorry that we don't have time for questions now because we need to get ready for Jumu'ah. Otherwise, I'd be happy to have questions for an hour, but we need to get ready for Jumu'ah today, and Jumu'ah will be at 2:30. That's 2 hours from now. You need to wash and get ready. You may want to take a nap, and inshallah, we'll come back for Jumu'ah. Then after that, we have a rest. And at 6:30, inshallah, we have Asr, and then we'll have another class. And that class, I think, could go on. You know, I don't want to tire you, but, you know, it's important for us to go over what we talked about now. And it's important for you to be comfortable with it. A lot of words, right? And a lot of concepts. And all of this is dealing with getting sound vocabulary and sound cognitive frames and paradigms. And that's a huge shift. If you've never thought like this before, then it's a miracle that you can get it all in one class. Okay, but also help yourself with your pen and then think about it. And we'll come back to talk about it next time, inshallah. So now I'll excuse myself because I'm supposed to be the khatib. And we give a 3-language khutbah, right? Because we have people here, we speak in Arabic. This is, the khutbah should be in Arabic. And then, of course, we have lots of Spaniards here, and we have to honor them. I do honor them, I love them, and we have to honor their language, which is an old Islamic language anyway. When Dr. Jackson heard us giving the khutbah in Arabic and Spanish, he said it really hit a note with me, because he said, I felt like that's the way it must have been here. And it was that way. The Spanish was, you know, Arabic and Spanish were like mother and daughter. They go together very nicely. And then, for the sake of the Anglophones, right, we'll try to put in a good word.